Hello and welcome to The Papers. I'll look ahead to what they're bringing us tomorrow, the night before. And to do that, we're joined by Philippa Leighton-Jones, editor of Wall Street Journal's City, and the political commentator, James Miller. Good evening to you both. Really nice to see you.
Good evening.
Before we hear from them, let's have a look at some of the front pages. We're going to start with the Metro. It leads with the immigration figures that were released today that show net migration has fallen for the first time in 2 years. The Mirror features that dramatic picture of the huge waves whipped up by Storm Doris. The Telegraph says ministers believe criminal inquiries into British soldiers' conduct during the Troubles are not appropriate and must be overhauled to ensure troops are not unfairly treated. The Eye's top story is an interview with Michael Gove in which he confesses he was wrong to stand for the Tory leadership. And the Daily Express reports that after the destruction of Storm Doris, the country now faces a new flood risk. The Times reveals plans by ministers to allow universities to offer fast-track degrees in return for raising tuition fees. The Guardian claims proposals to cut funding to the Met Police diversity watchdog will threaten race equality within the force. Now, concerns over the safety of Whirlpool tumble dryers is the Daily Mail's lead, with more than 750 fires reportedly caused by the machines. What a mix. Real mix of stories. Doris obviously features heavily. We'll look at that a bit later, but the Metro, it's decided to lead how many other papers have leaded on the latest migrant figures. And they all kind of report on it in a slightly different way. It's all how you want to read the figures.
Yeah.
The Metro saying migrants quit UK after Brexit vote. So, Philippa, do you think that's true?
Well, net migration is actually up. It's just that it's slowing from before. I think what a lot of these papers are focusing on are the Poles and the Czechs, who were obviously a big focus of immigration some time ago, have started going on and have started going home, and that there are still other immigrants coming in, Romanians, Bulgarians taking those places, but I think what they're really focusing on is the number of Eastern European immigrants who came here sort of in the first wave, in the sort of first group of 8 countries.
And you pointed out the Romanians and the Bulgarians. That's the lead on the front page of the Financial Times. Romanians and Bulgarians fill gap as growing number of Poles depart UK. Is that true?
Yeah, seems to be, as ever. It's complicated, much as lots of people would like to think immigration's really straightforward and you count the people going in and you count the people going out. It's not. As Philippa says, more people are coming in, but even more people are going out, which is why the figures are down. And yes, where they're from is interesting. The people from the so-called EU8, the Eastern European countries who joined, who were allowed to come here in 2011, those figures, a lot of them seem to be going home. But Bulgaria and Romania, who were given freedom of movement in 2014, now make up 28% of all immigrants to the UK from the EU. So there's still loads of them coming here. Is it to do with the Brexit vote? Are they coming in, before the door slams shut? Who knows? I mean, David Davis this week, the Brexit secretary, suggests the door isn't going to slam shut. So I think we're going to see more squabbling over numbers, and immigration is going to be around as a story for a long time to come.
And the number of students coming over to study seems to be going down as well, perhaps fearing that the education might get cut short.
So that's interesting, and there's a wider issue of how that pushes up the costs for domestic students if the foreign students aren't coming here to fund the more expensive courses. Then what is the knock-on effect for us, and is that really the intended outcome of Brexit? Probably not.
Well, that's what the Brexiteers want, is less immigration. So that's what they're getting. There will be knock-on effects, and we're all going to learn about it.
Right, let's move on. Staying with the FT, though, Oliver Letwin, the former number 10 policy chief, criticising the civil service, James.
What a man Oliver Letwin is, hey? This is the man who famously put top secret documents in the bin, who said he was going to cut public spending when he was during the 2001 election campaign and had to disappear, is criticising civil servants. I'm sure they'll be delighted to hear that from him. He says that they hide behind jargon, and I think he called it prolixity, which is obviously not a difficult jargon word at all. And the union, not surprisingly, has said, well, when you were in government, you cut 20% of civil servants and froze our pay. So maybe that had something to do with it.
There's been a lot of reform of the civil service, hasn't there? And because of comments like that, I suppose. But it's just strange that he starts talking about it now. Let's move on to the Daily Telegraph, because we've been hearing, according to the paper, from James Brokenshire, the Northern Ireland Secretary, who says that the Troubles inquiry is unfair to soldiers, Philippa.
So what he's basically saying is, look, you can't keep investigating soldiers who were involved in the Northern Ireland Troubles for years and years and years and leave this as a sort of open-ended inquiry and focus too much on, focus unfairly on the soldiers when actually who you should be focusing on are the terrorists. It's obviously hugely emotive. You can see both sides of this story. But, you know, as it says, there are some soldiers in the 60s and 70s and they don't know when this is sort of going to come back to them. And obviously the weight of evidence is so hard to stand
But there'll be a lot of victims who don't care.
A lot of victims who don't care that, you know, this is going on. They just want closure. So
Why is this coming out now? Is it because we've got the Stormont elections, perhaps?
Because there was a backbench debate about it, which is very strange for a backbench debate. There's very few MPs in the chamber for it, and yet the Telegraph's put it on the front page. It's a kind of telegraphy story, isn't it? It fits for them. The strange thing is the minister says he has called for a new system. Well, he's the minister, so why doesn't he just do it? I don't see why he's calling for anything. But yeah, clearly it's going to fit with the Stormont elections that are coming up next week.
Okay.
So we'll see the impact on that.
All right, another story on the Telegraph, chaos warning over business rates appeals. These are the business rates that the government seem to kind of be changing their mind about a little bit.
And a lot of companies still not sure what they'll be paying, and these are the business rates based on property rather than profitability. There's an interesting sort of wider macro picture here, which is that...
Is it chaos?
It's, I think it's fair to say there's a lot of chaos.
That's how the paper describes it.
Chaos is an intriguing word, because that was what was said yesterday, and when the Prime Minister said, oh, there isn't going to be any new money, and then the local government minister said, yes, there will be, and people said, this is chaos. It's the second day in a row, and it's the same story, and it's the same word. And that is not a good thing for any government, to have chaos attached that closely to any policy.
I think they'd rather use the word slight rethink.
It's all planned, is what they tell you. They're all on top of it. But I think.
Yeah, but we also know that governments like to test policies out and see what the reaction is before they actually push them through as well. You know, it could just be a case of that. Who knows? The Times, they are offering most of their front page to absolute heartbreak for some students, depending what way you look at it, I suppose. Students will be offered degrees over 2 years. That's the good news. It's just going to kind of cost you a bit, right? Is that right, Philippa?
But then you can get into work much sooner. If, of course, there was a job.
That's not always the idea about going to university, though, is it? Let's be honest.
So, you know, on paper, this actually is quite sensible. You spend less time taking a long summer holiday and maybe in the student bar, and you can actually sort of, you know, squeeze your studies into a more expensive 2-year course. Actually looks like this could be useful for mature students or students who just, you know that there's something they want to do after this. Most students, I guess, don't have a clue what they want to do after the university course, and they'd like the extra year to think about it. But you know, I think there is
I'm still thinking.
There is an interesting perspective there for, I think, for anyone who's sort of not an undergraduate or who probably is trying to squeeze studying in around something else.
Yeah.
On the face of it, it looks sensible, but I would approach with caution. Anything that involves tuition fees going up may look like the thin end of a wedge, and tuition fees
glass half full, half empty.
There's a few things to be wary of, I think, around that.
Now, there's going to be a lot of wary people tonight after being battered by Doris today. The Daily Mirror dedicating its front page. You've got those huge waves there, haven't you? And pictures that you usually get when these things happen, trying to keep their umbrella the right way up.
That was the picture in London,
so
where you see waves everywhere else, and then London, someone's umbrella goes the wrong way. It's actually a weather bomb, not just a storm, which is technical definition of which is when the pressure drops 24 millibars in 24 hours.
Oh, listen to you.
I thought weather bomb was just a made-up thing by the paper, but it's a real thing.
I think it's there's a lot of, you know, it was a windy day, and it was, you know, and you know, it's very sad. There are obviously, you know, some horrific accidents, but it's a storm, and it's obviously a storm that is given a little bit more front page credibility because it has a name.
It passes the test of what people are going to talk about in the pub. Everyone is talking about Doris, whether they
They've
are
got a story to tell, haven't they?
from all the way up the country. I mean, it has different effects in different places, but everyone's talking about it. But I mean, I mentioned that it's interesting that it's called Doris because apparently storms with female names are regarded as less threatening than storms with male names. I think we're on to, is it Evan next? Is that the next one
Ewan,
we've got
I think.
coming? Ewan, is it?
I think it's Ewan.
So it'll be interesting to see if people take that more seriously.
Yeah, Doris is just a bit of a joke then, just a bit of a...
Yeah.
How do you vote? So is it on Twitter that you vote for the names?
Something like that.
So
Something to do with it. I'm
something
slightly,
like
being horribly cynical, I wonder to what extent it's a Met Office, not a stunt,
PR.
but it's a way of getting a lot more attention both on the Met Office and on the weather bomb.
No, it's designed to make people take them more seriously.
We've just got time to talk about a story in the inside pages of the Times that we spotted. The housing crisis clogs up canals. This is a bit of an old story for me, just because this has been going on in London for a very long time, where people are opting for canal boats rather than houses.
Yeah. Well, the route between Little Venice and Regent's Park is a motorway, they say.
Well, it's nice. It's not a motorway, that's the thing, isn't it? It's nice and pretty, and you're on a boat instead of in a car, so it's quite pleasant.
But there's been complaints, hasn't there, from this is why I know about the story, because I covered it for BBC London. There's been lots of complaints from residents who live along the canal about the noise and the pollution and the litter from the amount of canal boats.
I think the pollution is a pretty good point, because they do chug out some horrific boat fuel fumes,
smoke.
whatever that is, and smoke, and maybe it is time to...
But I mean, the point is people are doing it. I mean, it is a London story, because even in the copy it says it'll probably happen in Birmingham and Manchester as well. They don't seem to have much evidence that it is, but it's especially happening in London because house prices are nuts, and so people have no option, or few options, and living on a riverboat seems a cheap and cheerful option.
Yeah.
Consequently, loads and loads are taking to it. I think there's a survey that more than half are doing it for financial rather than lifestyle reasons.
What if it's as romantic as it seems, though? One of their case studies says it's cold and crowded, but I love it. We've got to leave it there. Philippa and James, many thanks for taking us through the papers. Thanks to you for watching as well. Don't forget you can see all the front pages online on the BBC News website. It's all there for you, 7 days a week at bbc.co.uk/papers. And you can watch the programme as well if you missed some of it. We're there on iPlayer. Thanks to Philippa and James, and thanks to you. Good night.